Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. My name is Emily Spranger. I am an academic trainer from the Center for Teaching and Learning. And I'm here with one of our very own NCU faculty, Dr. Linda Bloomberg. Today, Dr. Bloomberg is going to be presenting Publishing and Presenting Your Dissertation Research, how to de-dissertationize your dissertation. Couple of things before we begin. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our CTL Webinars LibGuides page for future reference. Dr. Bloomberg has asked if you can use the Q&A to ask questions, and we will pause periodically throughout the presentation to answer those questions. And then feel free to use the chat as conversation. But do remember, if you want everyone to see your post in the chat, make sure you select the drop-down option to use everyone. Otherwise, it's just going to go straight to our panelists. So, and then Dr. Bloomberg also did let me know that she will send me the PowerPoint after this presentation. So please let me know if you need a copy of that. And we can also post that in our CTL LibGuides page as supplemental material to this webinar. So I won't take up any more time. I'm going to pass this over to our very own Dr. Linda Bloomberg.
Thanks so much, Emily, to you and the CTL for hosting these webinars for our faculty and students, for the entire NCU community, to learn more and improve our practice and, learn about issues that are important to us. And in this case, it's publishing and presenting our research. So also welcome to everybody. As I said to Emily earlier, I'm going to switch off my camera because we're in the middle of storms here in Georgia and I just don't want to lose power. That would be the last thing I'd like to do while I'm presenting. So I'm going to move through the PowerPoint and I'm going to be stopping at different points in this presentation to take questions. So write down what you're thinking about as we move along, and as soon as we get to a point of reflection, I'm going to stop and ask for those questions. You don't have to wait until the very end to ask what's on your mind. So with that said, I'm going to move forward explaining step by step what I have prepared here today. And the most important point is to remember that we are moving from student to scholar in our research process, right from the very beginning of our dissertation research and our doctoral studies, in fact. We're moving slowly from being students to scholars. And that's a very important concept and something to think about. Like, how do you want to show up as a scholar? What type of scholar do you want to be? Do you want to be a scholar that publishes? Do you want to be a scholar that presents research? What is your research going to do for you once you've completed it? And the way that you engage in being a scholar is by engaging in various types of professional activities, which we're going to be talking about in this webinar. There are many, many different types of activities to actually enact that scholarship in you. And sorry, the first one that we're going to be talking about, and the one that I think is on everybody's mind, is publications. How do I publish? Where do I publish? What's in it to have a publication accepted? What does it take? What do I need to do? All of these questions swirl around in our minds as we're busy working on our research, and especially once we've completed it. How do we actually take our research to the next level and make it usable and accessible to a broader audience, as opposed to just our dissertation committee and even our peers? So how do we do this? Let's take a closer look. Let's start off by looking at publishing in peer-reviewed journals, which is the ultimate. Peer-reviewed are often called refereed or scholarly journals. And these journals are written and managed by experts and are reviewed by several other experts in the field before an article is actually accepted. So the big idea is sort of self-explanatory. Peer-reviewed journals are peer-reviewed. And that's what makes them the highest level of a journal and the most acceptable and prestigious to have an article published in one of these types of journals. Remember, within the academic community, and you are being exposed to this already in your doctoral studies, peer review is an essential component of the academic writing process. Even in your dissertation writing, your work is being reviewed by your committee, your dissertation chair, your subject matter expert, and at various points by the academic reader. So this is already a form of peer review. And so you are already accustomed to this in your dissertation process. But adhering to this maintains integrity by helping to ensure that your work is actually reviewed by several experts in the field, so that what you're presenting and what you're writing is actually the best that it can possibly be. There is a link that I provide here as well on how to recognize peer-reviewed journals and what are considered peer-reviewed and highly acceptable peer-reviewed journals. So once you get this presentation, you'll be able to click on that link and review this idea further. Let's also talk about what commonly comes up, which is the concept of an impact factor, which we sometimes just refer to as the IF. The impact factor in an academic peer-reviewed journal is an index that reflects how many citations a journal has published in the last 2 years. And so journals with a higher impact factor are often considered to be more important and more prestigious than those with a lower impact factor. Often very professional editors and publishers will really take a close look at the impact factor of a journal to make a decision of whether or not to publish their article in that journal. So this factor really does carry a lot of weight and is really important to consider. And by the way, all peer-reviewed journals will list their impact factor, so it is a trustworthy and credible source. Let's also look at this notion of open access as opposed to traditional journals. And open access is not a bad thing, and I want to make that clear here. Research is disseminated through many, many venues, including blogs, social media, and also open access scholarly journals. And the operative word is scholarly, because open access journals are considered scholarly. These are journals that are freely available, and they often are free because they carry less restrictive copyright and licensing barriers than traditionally published works. And while open access is a newer form of scholarly publishing, many open access journals do comply fully with well-established peer review processes, and they also maintain very high publishing standards. So please don't be put off by open access journals. They are considered peer reviewed in many cases, and they are prestigious and very acceptable sources. But there's a big caveat here, and that is that there are many predatory publishing houses out there which should not be in any way confused with open access publishing. Open access means that the studies or the research or the material is free for everybody to access, and this helps to quickly disseminate information. Predatory publishers do charge a fee. These journals do not follow standard publishing practices, and they are not indexed in reputable search systems, making the information nearly impossible to find. So whereas it may seem sort of inviting to publish in a journal that approaches you, you may wonder like, wow, this person has found me, this publisher's found me, they're offering me a chance to publish in their journal. Just be aware that these obviously do not carry any weight to the extent that an open access or traditional journal would carry, and that when you do publish with them, A, you will be paying a fee, and B, once your article is published, it may really sort of become buried or hidden because these journals are not indexed in reputable search systems, as I say here. So again, just to be very clear, the predatory journals will contact you to submit a proposal, and they often do not provide credible information about the readership or oversight of their journal. So ways to avoid being sort of fooled by this is to always check the website thoroughly, to check to see if the journal is a member of a reputable publishing council, check the journal's contact information and editorial board, take a very close look at their peer review process and their publication timelines, and read through past issues of that journal to determine their credibility. And again, I've provided a link here for how to detect predatory journals and how to be aware of them if and when they come your way. So let's again go back to the open access and traditional journals, and just to make the distinction very clear. There are four different ways that you can distinguish between these two. First is visibility. Publishing in your article in an open access journal means that more people are likely to see it because more people will have accessed it, simply because it's free. And your data will also be available to educators and the general public, many of whom do not have access to expensive journal subscriptions, which is traditionally the case with traditional journals. So there we have it. Visibility is one key difference. Another key difference is cost. Both traditional and open access journals may charge a small fee at the time of submission to cover editorial and peer review costs, but the cost with subscriptions to traditional journals is much higher. So traditional journals do carry a much higher cost in the long run. The third differentiating factor is prestige. The most common reason for deciding not to publish in an open access journal is related to concerns about the perceived quality of that publication. And many academics will place importance on brand name journals to increase their chances of being promoted, gaining tenure, and obtaining funding for grant proposals. Also, many new open access journals have not yet received their first impact factor, which is an important factor to consider. So you need to consider to what extent, whether and to what extent prestige is important to you in the publishing process. And the fourth consideration is speed. Publishing in any peer-reviewed journal will always entail some delay because the reviewers are given a certain amount of time, weeks or even months, to review a publication. But open access journals typically advertise a much more rapid turnaround process, as is reflected in their mission statement. So open access journals will try and be more, offer a more attractive possibility because this peer review process is shortened to some extent and is not as lengthy as in traditional journals. Remember, traditional journals have been around for years and years, many of them. And so they do carry a lot of credibility and weight. And they do also have very, very high standards, which makes it harder to publish in them and takes more time to get your publication reviewed and finally accepted. Again, let's look at all the different ways of choosing a journal, because by now you've got like a lot of ideas swirling around in your mind. There's open access, there's traditional, there are predatory journals. How do I actually make the decision of where and when to publish? So before you actually start the process, I would say there are two factors to consider and two steps to take into consideration. The first is to review multiple articles in your field and become familiar with what research has already been published. So that would be a general search process. What publications are there in my field that I can access right now? And try and access the most current ones, because you can go back many, many years, and it's wonderful to have historical data, but try and see what's current, what's been published in my field or around my topic in the last 1 to 3 years. And doing this will also save you valuable time by not submitting to poorly matched journals. So this is the very first stage. Take a look at what journals are out there that have published in your area. And you do this by conducting a journal search. And journal searches, I'm just going to put on the screen in the next couple of slides what a journal search looks like. Here's one, for example. If you're looking at distance education and e-learning journals, then a whole lot of different journals will come up, and you can choose from multiple journals. You can also look at each journal's about the journal. Take a look at what each one offers. Who is the editorial team? How do you contact the journal? What are their policies? What are their submission details? And then other information that they provide. So really take a very, very good look at what the journal offers and what the journal is all about. Here's another one. This particular journal talks about their mission statement. They list their archives where you can browse their different publications going back many years. Look at their submission details. What do they require? And then they do give very detailed submission directions, which is key to publishing in any journal. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. Here's another one. This journal provides details about their contents, their subscriptions, how to submit, what is their review process, who are their editors, etc. So once you start doing, I'm just going to go back to that. Once you start doing this very, very thorough search on what different journals in your particular field have published on your particular topic, this will start narrowing down for you what potential journals you can apply to with your proposed manuscript. So that's your first step, to start seeing what journals are out there, what is their impact factor, what weight do they carry, how applicable is that journal for your particular field and topic, and to start choosing a handful of journals that make sense in these respects. So I'm going to stop there for a moment to take questions before we move to the next section. Thanks, Emily.
Hello, Dr. Bloomberg. Yes, we certainly have some questions in the Q&A. We'll try to get through a couple of them. Dr. Bloomberg, how do you select journals to publish? How do you select journals to publish with? And how do you meet the criteria of the journal to achieve publication? I know you've given some ideas here, but is there anything else that you want to expand on?
There's nothing else to expand on right now other than to really, as I say, be aware of, is this a traditional journal? Is it an open access? And hopefully it's not a predatory journal. So once you've made those distinctions, then, as I say, go through a search of your topic area in different journals that could possibly be applicable in your field. So if you're doing something on qualitative research, there are a number of different journals that deal with qualitative research. If you're doing an article on online learning, there are multiple journals that deal specifically with online learning. So try and become very, very specific around your topic and your field of practice to start selecting the most relevant journals, and then take a very, very good look at their subscription and their application details, because that is going to let you know what they require. And you will have to really comply directly with their requirements in terms of word count, the way you structure your manuscript. So with all of this, and we're going to be getting to that in the very next slide, is leading to how to de-dissertationize your dissertation. But I'm going to get to that in the next slide once we've gone through the questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Bloomberg. The next question is, what are ways to increase my impact factor to publish in a particular journal?
Well, remember, the impact factor has not got to do with you as a writer. The impact factor has got to do with the journal. Each journal carries its own impact factor, which is based on the number of citations of that journal. How many people cited that journal or articles in that journal over a period of time? So the higher the impact factor means that the journal is more desirable. It's nothing that you can do. It's all to do with the actual journal.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is it okay to pay a fee for open access license instead of going with the fee print restricted option, non-predatory journals?
Yes, if you use an open access journal or even sometimes a traditional journal, there will be a fee attached. So if you want to publish in a particular journal, you will have to comply with those fee requirements. I don't believe that those are negotiable. I think that each journal has its own fee attached. Some of them are free, open access are free, but if it's a traditional journal, you will have some fee, which goes to pay the reviewers and the actual publication process, because most traditional journals are published in print, and printing costs money. So you will have to pay a fee if you wish to publish in a journal that requires a fee.
Okay, thank you so much. So we'll pause there and restart.
Sure, we'll come to them afterwards. Okay, perfect, no problem. Okay, so we're going to be moving to the next slide, which is the big sort of elephant in the room, secret ingredient, which is how to de-dissertationize your dissertation. Now, I had a student recently who came to me and said that she submitted her dissertation to a journal, and the journal came back with a response in terms of, well, please comply with our submission guidelines, and we'd love to review this again. And the main problem was that the student had not de-dissertationized her dissertation. She had, in fact, just submitted her actual dissertation, and that doesn't work with publications. You have to make sure that you follow all publication requirements and write for a particular audience. In other words, who reads this journal? And the key idea here is to choose only the most important elements of your research to write about. So remember, de-dissertationizing a dissertation is about extracting the key elements of your research and writing about those key elements. It's not about presenting your dissertation as it is. That's much too long. It's too lengthy. There's too much to include and it's not necessary, and you don't have the space to do so. So a journal article is also not just a summary of your dissertation. That doesn't work for most reputable publishing houses. They want to see a synthesis of the key points related to specific themes or issues or topics. So in other words, you may not even use the actual title of your dissertation. You may have to transform that into something that more accurately depicts what you're writing about. So I hope that you're getting the idea that de-dissertationizing the dissertation is about taking out of your dissertation only that which you want to highlight and then writing about that as a journal article, following all of the requirements of the particular journal that you're submitting your article to. Now, for instance, if you submit a proposed journal article to one journal or publishing house, and it's not accepted for some reason, and you then decide which is the way to go, not give up, but submit it to another journal for their review, their requirements are going to be somewhat different. So you may not be able to submit exactly what you submitted for the first journal. You may have to tweak it. You may even have to change the title, because you do have to comply with the actual requirements of each specific journal, and that is really important. Otherwise, you stand a low chance of having your article accepted. In addition to all of that, always make sure that your article is thoroughly edited for grammar errors and typos, and you do this by thorough proofreading. So before you submit to any journal, and you should also have this in the back of your mind, even when you're submitting your chapters to your dissertation chair and to your committee, always proofread, because grammar errors and typos are a red flag. It just is an indication that you haven't taken the time to make sure that your document is in tip-top polished shape, which should be standard practice all through the dissertation process. And then once you get to the publishing process like this, you will already have that habit ingrained. Now remember also, every single journal requires a different manuscript length. Some of them may be 16 pages, some of them may be 12, some may be 15. There are differences. But remember, for a 30-page double-spaced document running at about 7,500 words, a general breakdown is that a double-spaced page contains approximately 250 words. And that's just a general rule of thumb, but something to keep in mind as you're preparing your journal article. But the key thing is to remember that every single journal has its own requirements, and that each application must meet those requirements, or you will stand a lower chance of having your article accepted. So let's now jump from journal articles, which I think I've covered pretty in quite great detail. And obviously there will be questions, and I'll be happy to take them when possible. But let's move to publishing book chapters and books. And that's the next level up from journal articles. If you're looking to publish in either a book chapter in an edited volume or your own book, first look for distinguished and reputable publishing houses. This is key because, again, you don't want to publish your work in a subpar manner. And so reputable publishing houses, as with journal articles, becomes really important. So I'm going to move that a little away. Okay. Usually university presses, which is universities publishing press, or large commercial publishers like Sage Publications or Josie Bass or Routledge, those are really reputable publishing houses that one should aspire to. Now remember, writing a new book as opposed to book chapters, and book chapters are excellent. I'm not in any way minimizing those, but I'm just focusing on writing a new book is a really substantial undertaking and requires extensive knowledge, expertise, and experience in a specific field of area. Often books will come about from compiling multiple journal articles in your field, developing targeted expertise in a particular area. And also, a book comes about very much from the need for a textbook for classroom or course application. So there are many different factors. What I'm trying to say here is there are many different factors that go into publishing book chapters or books. And the big two factors are your expertise and experience in that area and the need for those chapters or books. Again, before we get on to the next, Emily, is there any opportunity for questions or still not yet?
Hi, Dr. Bloomberg. I'm actually assisting Emily right now. She's having some technical difficulties. I actually just checked the Q&A, and as of right now, I don't see any additional questions.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. Thanks you. I'll stop again at the next point and let you know if there, and you can let me know if there are any. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot. So now that we've moved from publishing journal articles and publishing book chapters and books, let's move to conference and webinar presentations, which is a very exciting part of presenting and disseminating your research findings. And there are so many opportunities here that you can take advantage of. Remember, also because of the pandemic, the virtual opportunities have been highlighted and come to the forefront. And this really alleviates you the cost of travel and in-person presentations. There are way more opportunities now than there ever were before. So there should be no reason for you not to find a great venue for your research. So presenting at conferences or webinars is a natural outcome of working on a research project such as a dissertation. What you should do is check your professional associations. Also reach out to your faculty members, your chair or your subject matter expert about professional conferences, either attending or presenting. Remember, often attending conferences is a precursor to presenting. So starting to attend conferences is a great way to get your foot in the door to start seeing how people are presenting, what they're presenting, what are the requirements, what it all looks like. So attending conferences, and I say virtual conferences are great too, just to get that idea is a great first step. You can also seek assistance from your faculty for support and assistance with your presentation. And very often students are also serving as co-presenters with their faculty at professional conferences or webinars. So that's another great opportunity to engage in. Aside from actual roundtable and panel presentations, which most conferences offer, there is also the opportunity for poster presentations, which is a great opportunity, again, to present your research, to actually lay it out on a poster board for everybody to see. And very often these posters will be available electronically, so more people than just the people that actually attend the conference will have access to these afterwards as well. So these are just some ideas of what poster presentations look like. And again, the conference or webinar will have specific requirements for what their posters need to look like. And so you will need to also comply with their requirements in setting up and constructing your poster, which is great because it's very helpful to know what they're looking for and how to actually do it. And all of the support is provided by their administrators. So it shouldn't be anything intimidating. It should be exciting to you. Remember, research posters are often developed in tandem, in conjunction with first drafts of a manuscript, depending on what type of presentations you're accepted to give at a conference. So if you're working on even a possible journal article, you may consider presenting it as a research poster to start with and get feedback on that, which is a great way to sort of enhance your article and get some ideas how to go forward with it. The poster is a visual and succinct research account to present your research findings. And practice, when you do present at poster presentations, I always say practice an elevator story, an elevator speech, which is a summary of your research, so that when people come by your poster presentation, even if it's virtual, you will have a little speech prepared, which is a short, bite-sized speech of what your research was about and how you came to present this poster. So people will really appreciate having some dialogue with you about your your poster, about your research, in addition to just seeing it as a specific or actual poster. And remember also, when you're presenting your poster, space is limited, as with a journal article. So while you're following the guidelines of the particular conference or webinar, you can also save space by using a QR code to link your readers to your references and other supplemental information. A QR code is a great way and is being used in a lot of publications now, instead of wasting space within the book or journal to actually list all the references and all the appendixes, etc. So that's another tip to save space on your poster. Okay, before we get to the next, I'm going to stop again. Jenna, if you or Emily are able to access any questions, that'll be great.
Thank you, Dr. Bloomberg. We actually have quite a few, so bear with me. I think they kind of all came in right as I logged in.
No problem. And if these questions go back to previous sections as well, that's absolutely fine.
Awesome. So we do have someone who wants to know how to access your book about qualitative research.
Oh, that book is freely available through the NCU store. Not freely available, it's available through the NCU store. It's also available on Amazon or directly through the publisher, through Sage Publications. And remember that the most updated version is the 4th edition, which contains the most recent and up-to-date information.
Perfect, thank you. Someone else has a question on proofreading. Is it self-proofreading or third-party proofreading prior to submission to dissertation chair?
Okay, to dissertation chair, I believe that self-proofreading is essential always. And when you're submitting your DP or your DM for review, our wonderful Academic Success Center has recently introduced a proofreading service free of charge for NCU students. So you're able to use that proofreading service at those 2 points. Up until those 2 points, when you are proofreading just individual chapters, I believe you can use an outside proofreader, but remember, you cannot use an outside editor to write your dissertation for you. But all of our students at the graduate level are pretty good at proofreading. Everybody should be pretty good at proofreading. So you can catch grammar and typo errors yourself if you are vigilant. So there are many different options.
Thank you. Can you discuss the use of preprint websites as a way to use the community to help correct or include things that you may have missed?
I'm not sure how to answer that. Do you know anything about that, Jenna?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. If we can just hold that question aside and maybe we can look into it after the webinar. I'm just not sure about that.
Yeah, definitely. I can flag it.
Thank you.
Where can one find the if in an academic journal?
Impact factor. The impact factors will always be listed in a traditional or open access peer-reviewed journal. So if the journal is reputable, they will list their impact factor, and you can search for it online. You can search a particular journal and search for the impact factor. It will be freely available. These are not secrets. With predatory journals, again, that's the area to be more wary of, because usually they don't have an impact factor. And if they do list the impact factor, you have to make sure that it's a credible impact factor.
Actually, and it looks like one of our attendees wants to know if they should select journals before starting the research. And if so, how should these journals be selected?
Well, it's very difficult to select a journal before you do your research, because then you don't know what your research is actually going to look like finally. Remember, you can only publish your research after it's complete. And many, many different twists and turns can take place along the way, as many of our students know, and as most of our chairs and committee members know. Research is an iterative process. And so research problems may change, research purpose, research questions. So even though you may stay within a particular topic area, the specifics can change. And only once you've actually completed your research do you have something substantial to go on. And that's the point at which you will start looking at journals in your field and seeing what they've published on your topic. So it's, in other words, it's a double-layered approach. You're looking at journals and you're also looking at the specific topics that journal has published about. And that's the way you would do it. So I don't think it's really possible or even advisable to start looking before you've done your research, because you don't really know where you're going to land up.
Are there certain more effective ways to search for these journals online?
Just what I've mentioned previously is to actually do a journal search, like what you can even put in, what are the journals out there on online learning? And you'll get, like I showed in one of the slides previously, I just want to go back to where I had it. You'll see that usually here, for example, I searched for distance education and e-learning journals, and I got all of these, and there were tons more. I just took a screenshot of the first section. But you'll see what journals there are: American Journal of Distance Education, Asian Association of Open Universities, Australasian Journal, British Journal, Canadian, Chief Learning Officer. There'll be tons and tons. This only goes to D, as you can see, from A to D. So you can look for journals. There's no specific way of looking other than searching. And remember, our library, the NCU library, is amazing in terms of their support and assistance. So if you are having any difficulty at all searching for journals, I have no doubt that our librarians would help you in searching for these as well. So also your chair and your dissertation committee, if you ask them, specific techniques or specific ways to go about this, I have no doubt that they will also support you in this regard.
We do have a few more. I didn't know if you wanted to get back to your presentation or if you wanted to keep answering.
Let's keep answering, because I'm going to move into like the next section. And so let's just get through all the questions, well, to the extent possible, unless there are hundreds right now.
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll continue on. Do you think it's appropriate to submit work to multiple journals simultaneously?
That's a great question. You actually are not, you should not be submitting to multiple journals simultaneously. A lot of traditional and even open access journals will ask you not to do that, because that will waste a lot of time on their part. If you can, put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Are you there, Jenna? Because I've just lost you.
Nope, I am still here.
Okay. If we put ourselves in the shoes of a journal, if they are taking the time to put your article through peer review, and you're having this done by multiple journals at the same time, and ultimately you're going to choose what you want, then it's wasted a lot of people's time. So I would suggest looking at your top journal choice, applying to that one, and if that is not successful, then going down the line. But I know that a lot of journals do not condone multiple applications simultaneously.
Do you think that professional conferences, including virtual conferences, are a good way to find journals to publish in?
It really depends on that professional conference. If they would give you a list of journals that are related or applicable to their particular conference. For example, the Distance Teaching and Learning Conference that took place in August, I'm sure that they would be very willing to share the different journals that are related to distance teaching and learning. But again, approach the conference organizers with that question, and if they're able to help you, I'm sure that they will.
We do have a question. It says, what's the difference between an infograph and a poster? And what word count should one keep the poster to?
I'm not sure if an infograph is the exact same thing as a poster. You'd have to check with a particular conference that is calling for that. I think it can be synonymous with poster, but maybe not always. So it would depend on the particular context. So I could not give you a clear yes or no answer on that. Sorry, what was the second part of that question?
Basically the word count, how many words should be in the poster.
Again, the particular conference or webinar will let you know very, very clearly and directly what their word count is, what their structure is, how they want the poster created, where to use bullet points, where not to use bullet points, etc. So they will be very, very specific. There'll be nothing sort of like fuzzy about that. It'll be very clear to you, as with any journal publisher.
Perfect. Actually, here's a really good one. It talks about reusing paragraphs from the dissertation. Is that considered self-plagiarism?
No, not at all. Because not at all. Your dissertation, once it's published and once it's complete, is your work. Now, there may be certain instances where you have to cite yourself, but I really don't believe that you would have to in a journal. I have never had to do that. But again, check with a particular journal. And if that's a question on your mind and you'd like clarification, by all means, ask that particular journal that you're submitting to. In my experience, you do not have to cite yourself in a journal articles because you're writing about your study. So the whole thing is about your work. The whole article is about your dissertation work.
We have another one. How do you recognize a high IF? Is it by a percentage score or some other metric?
I do believe that the link that I've provided on that page will help you with that. It'll help you understand the impact scores better. So instead of going into the actual nuts and bolts of it now, just because in the interest of time, if you could please just look at that link that I've provided, and I think you'll get your answers there. And you'll get a very clear idea there of what's considered a high impact score, medium score, or a very low score, and also how these scores are actually created. Or arrived at, should I say.
And what is the advantage of pairing with other people in your field on an article before submitting an article to a journal?
Well, if you're going to pair with other people, either with one person or a team, then you're making a commitment to submitting your article with them, right? So if you're going to be collaborative in your approach and you'd like to do either a publication or presentation with other colleagues, then all of you together would be developing the article or the presentation, and all of you would have your name on it. So once you make that decision, you'd go forward accordingly, either to do it alone or to do it with colleagues.
Okay, and then I have, it actually looks like we have a little more information about the preprints. It says Preprints is a subsidiary of MDPI. It allows researchers to post their papers before peer review, and publishers mostly allow non-committant publication in these situations, but there's not much known about these in terms of their benefits. Do you know anything about that?
I actually don't, to be honest. I have never encountered that in my experience. But again, please feel free to explore that further. And if whoever's asking this, if you have knowledge of it, it would be great to share it after this, maybe to send some information into the CTL so we can add it to this webinar or add it as a note. Because if that is a possibility and if that's some new development, it'll be great to know about. Thank you. That's a great question, and I'd like to know more about that as well.
Awesome. I will definitely flag that. Let's get to one more and then we'll go back to your presentation.
Okay, sounds good.
We have, can you discuss an article's hierarchy of authors, first author, second author, etc.?
That's something that is negotiated among the authors themselves. Traditionally, it always was that a journal article or a presentation, the presenters or the authors will be listed alphabetically. Sometimes the authors do not themselves prefer not to recognize that order, and they choose their own order. When a faculty member is submitting an article with their student or their graduate student or a student that has already completed their dissertation and defended, then that again would be a subject for them to discuss among themselves. There is no hard and fast rule. As I say, it used to be that alphabetical order was the most acceptable, but it's not always the case. So again, think about it in terms of the specific situation, you know, who started off with the article or the presentation, who came in next, you know, and try and work on it that way. I hope that helps, because it is, again, it's a sort of gray area that is really specific to any situation and not just a general one-size-fits-all approach.
We do have some more. I just didn't know if you wanted to get back to your presentation.
Okay. Let me get back to the presentation because I see that we have like 13 minutes remaining. And then if we have time at the end, please hold those questions over. And when I stop next, I'll take them. Okay. Does that work?
Thank you. Mhm.
Okay. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks for your support. So let's take a look at what comes. We've already been through journal articles, book chapters, books, and research posters. Let's move on now to the next way of presenting research, which is becoming a really exciting modality in today's world, and that is podcasts. So you can definitely extend your research with a podcast. Many higher educational professionals and educators are seeking to increase exposure for their research beyond their disciplines and to a much broader audience, and podcasts are a great way to do this. Remember, you want your academic research to reach as many people as possible. And so this is an excellent tool to promote your research among a lay audience, which is opposed to the academic audience. And the lay audience would normally not be exposed to your research. So this is really a way to extend your research in a very much broader manner than just an academic research, academic journal or an academic poster presentation or an academic book or book chapter. Let's look at what makes a successful podcast. Firstly, you should be developing your presentation outline very carefully so that your discussion flows logically. Because remember, your podcast is a presentation, a verbal presentation. And so you should develop this presentation very carefully ahead of time so that you know what you're going to be talking about and that you're not stumbling or presenting your information in an illogical fashion. Be very decisive and control the direction of your discussion, unless, of course, you're being interviewed, in which case you will respond to the interviewer's questions and they will be controlling the direction. Be also very clear whether you're being interviewed or if you're just presenting on your own. Be very, very clear about what your message is and the message that you want to convey through this podcast. Remember, podcast audiences want real hard-hitting content. They don't want something boring. They want to stay engaged. People can be listening to podcasts while they're driving, while they're in an airplane, while they're sitting at the doctor's office waiting for their appointment. So they want to be engaged. They want the content to be meaningful. And so get to know who your listeners may be and how your work may be relevant to them. So you want to be very, very clear, very, very focused in your presentation. Also, talk clearly. You want to maintain your listeners' interest right until the very end. You don't want people to start listening and then switch off because it's boring or they're not able to follow your train of thought. The benefits of a podcast, as I said previously, it's an alternative to video. It's an alternative to all the other means of presentation. It generates increased traffic. It helps build you and your brand. It helps build relationships with an intended audience. And that's really important. Remember, you will often create multiple podcasts for a particular audience. And so the one-off podcast can then sort of merge or evolve into multiple podcasts where you're presenting on your topic to an audience who's actually waiting for you for your next podcast. So that's what you want to do. You want to capture attention and you want to sustain that attention. A podcast is a really easy and inexpensive way to create and to build that brand. It can be very engaging if you do it well. And it also helps you improve your public speaking skills in preparation for conferences and webinars. So it's a great all-round win-win situation where you're building yourself, you're building your skills, you're building your product, and you're building an audience at the same time. And finally, I think this is the final one, are blogs. And blogs, again, have recently really shot into the sphere of academics in a much bigger way than they ever had. And as with podcasts, you can start with a single blog and you can then build it into multiple blogs where you have a captive audience that's actually waiting for the next blog. A blog is a type of website that focuses on specific written content. And you can start your blog on almost any topic imaginable. So whatever is important to you, you can write about. Blogs usually have a comment section where readers can correspond with you and with other readers by typing in the comment section. Interacting with your readers in the comment section helps further the connection between you and your reader. You can also link your blogs to many social media sites such as LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, etc. And these kind of connections allow you to interact and share ideas, which is the purpose of publishing and presenting, and also opens up the door to developing a following, an audience following. So you can begin to establish and strengthen your image, your brand, or you yourself as a researcher based on your research topic. So there are just, again, with blogs, it's a win-win situation of moving your research or moving your topic into a much broader area for much broader dissemination to reach a much broader audience, and thereby moving out of that academic community, being a scholar in a much broader realm or sphere. I'm going to stop there for questions, and then I'm going to wrap up in the last 5 minutes. So let's say we spend 3 minutes on questions, Jenna.
Okay, perfect. I have an attendee asking, if faculty do not have suggestions for conferences, are there recommended ways to find reputable ones?
Well, our Commons is a great way to reach out to colleagues in the whole NCU community, including students, alumni, and faculty and staff, for people's recommendations. So if you are intending to present your research on a particular topic, why don't you put a note in the Commons and see what your colleagues can tell you about? Remember, because we're all in the same academic community, we're all working on research in some way, whether we're faculty or students or alumni, we all have some great ideas and some connections. So please use this community to ask those questions if you want to move just beyond your own particular dissertation committee or dissertation chair. And just to say this, I have seen some great conversations on this exact question in the Commons, where students or alumni have reached out and their colleagues have really come to the front with some amazing ideas and suggestions and support.
Thank you. We have another, I think this is a really good one. It looks like somebody's actually worked with Dr. Babcock and Dr. Lehan to publish an article. Both of them stated that they had to have tough skin for basically the process and any of the rejections. So after 2 declines, they were accepted by the 3rd journal. The attendee wants to know, what would you tell students who get constant declines for publication?
I would say persevere, persevere, persevere. It's very, very typical to get declines and rejections, but please don't let that stifle your motivation. Don't let that bring you down. Obviously, it's disappointing. You've put a lot of work in, you've put a lot of effort in, you're excited, you feel that other people will be excited, and then it's not accepted. And there are many, many reasons why a journal can reject an article. It might not be according to their standards. They might not be looking for that particular topic at that particular time. Many, many reasons, but that should not stifle your own motivation and perseverance in going forward and trying other options. So please never let one closed door mean a closed door. Let that just be an opening to other avenues.
Okay, that is it. Let's definitely go to wrap up.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Jenna. Really appreciate your support. Okay, so I put the slide up just to let you start thinking about what is on your wish list. We've spoken a lot here today about different ways of disseminating your research from your dissertation, which has been a long and hard journey. And it may not be immediately, it may not be the next week, it may not be the next month, it may even take a year. But once you've completed your research, you have within you some findings that really will benefit a broader audience. Because remember, your dissertation is now probably just a book or a manuscript on your shelf, on maybe your committee's shelf, on the library shelf, but it hasn't reached the world. And you want your article to be of value to others. So what is on your wish list? How would you like to disseminate your findings? What appeals to you? Is it a journal article? Is it a book chapter? Is it a blog? Is it a podcast? Is it a poster presentation? Is it a conference presentation? So I would just urge you to start thinking about those things and to start, getting in your mind what you can possibly go forward with. So that was the one thing. And the other thing was just, again, questions and aha moments. In the final literal 3 minutes that we have together, I'm happy to take any further questions, surprises, anything that you feel you would have liked me to cover that I didn't, anything you'd like to know more about. I'm quite happy to do so right now. Jenna?
We actually have one last question.
Perfect. And maybe while you're reading it, if anything pops into anybody else's mind, we have until the top of the hour, which is literally 2 minutes away, but I'm happy to try if possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Are traditional journals the best option for those wanting to pursue teaching in academia?
Traditional journals are the highest order of hierarchy in terms of prestige. So traditional journals are the way to go if you're looking to pursue a career in academia, and that's not to in any way put down open access journals, which are also very often peer reviewed. But as I said previously, many academics will only look at traditional journals because that is what's required for tenure, for promotion, and these are the most prestigious journals. Again, along with that comes the downside, which is that they're the most difficult journals to get your article published in because they carry that prestige and because their peer review process is that much more rigid and rigorous. So there are some trade-offs. If you're not able to achieve that, then open access journals, if they're peer reviewed, are excellent avenues as well. And along with that, I'm just going to state again, and I think I made it clear, just be aware of the predatory journals. That will not serve you well in the long run. It will not be worth your effort because your research may never go anywhere. Your article may never go anywhere because those journals don't have the marketing capacity or the networking capacity, or sometimes even the money and resources to promote the journal articles that are written for them.
Okay, I think that just about wraps everything up. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Bloomberg. I really appreciate it. And I want to remind everyone that the recording is going to be available within 24 hours on our CTL webinar page.
So I just want to say also thank you so much, Jenna and Emily, for all of your support, and to the entire CTL team for always hosting webinars for our faculty and students and alumni to make our learning experience here as rich and meaningful as possible. I always love presenting for you, and thank you for the opportunity to present on this topic, which is something I think is worthwhile and meaningful. So I hope that it was valuable for our audience today.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.